Hola a todos. Hola, buenos días. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estamos? Son las 2:15 aquí en Inglaterra. No sé qué hora es donde están ustedes. Supongo que tenemos gente aquí por todo el mundo, todos en una zona diferente. Bueno, hoy quiero hablar un poco sobre aprender palabras y cómo construir un vocabulario potente en español. Let's do it in English. Um, and so here's a question. If you need to learn thousands of words in order to speak good Spanish, how do you do it? Now, the traditional approach to learning would have you basically work through books, textbooks, go to classes, things like that, where in a fairly systematic way, you're kind of presented with new vocabulary to learn based on something from your textbook, and you kind of have to go about doing that. Then you have kind of exercises where you will fill in the gaps or do some kind of word games or whatever it may be. And this is the traditional way of doing it. And the reason that language classes are normally taught in that way is because it's easy to teach. You break things down, make kind of easily chunkable, digestible exercises, and it gives you the impression that the whole nebulous task of learning a language is a little bit easier, right? Now, the problem with this is that in Spanish you've got thousands of words to learn. Now, you can start communicating with a lot less, and they say that the top 100 words in Spanish account for over 50% of spoken Spanish. So you can get very far with a small number of words. The trouble is, of course, that the other 50% there are thousands and thousands of words to learn. And so here's the basic reason why so many people struggle to build the kind of vocabulary they need to be able to speak in fluent Spanish. And the reason is that they take this traditional approach of learning, of saying, I'm going to work systematically through my textbooks, learning one list of words at a time, until I build the vocabulary I need, until I get to my 5,000 words or whatever it may be that I need in order to speak fluently. The trouble is there's too many things to learn. We forget stuff so easily. It never ceases to amaze me how I can study a new word in all kinds of different permutations, and the next day, doesn't matter how long I've studied it for, I will forget it. It's inevitable. The brain remembers words through repetition, and a combination of repetition and time. If you just see a word once, you're very unlikely to remember it. Sometimes it happens and it's cool when it does, but more often than not, that doesn't happen. The way that we stack the cards in our favour for learning vocabulary is to plan to see that vocabulary many, many times, okay? Through repetition. And the great thing about a more natural way of approaching Spanish, say by getting a lot of input through reading and listening, is that repetition happens naturally. Okay? So let's say, for example, you've got a short story. And my books of short stories have become very, very popular for this reason, I think. It's because you start to read them, and then you get to see that same vocabulary cropping up over and over again in the story. And so through a natural activity, which is reading, and then listening along to the audiobook, or some kind of combination of the two, these words keep coming up and coming up and coming up. So as long as you can either guess what the word is or look it up somehow, then naturally through the activity you get all that kind of repetition, and then as a result you learn the vocabulary. If you've read my books of short stories, for example, you'll know that you might come across a new word at the beginning of chapter 1, and you'll think, oh, what's that? And so you'll look it up, and you'll see what that word is. And then by the time you've got to the end of chapter 3, you will know that word because you've just seen it lots and lots in context. Right? Now, this approach, an approach based on lots of reading and listening, works so well because you cover so much ground. If you use textbooks, you're kind of restricted to what's in your chapter. But if you have a diet of reading and listening to interesting material in Spanish, then you're just, over the course of a week, exposed to thousands and thousands of words, which gives your brain the chance to acquire new words naturally. That's the power of this kind of approach. Now, the key to making this work is to make sure that you are using material that is at the right level for you. Specifically, that is it's Krashen's I+1, as it's known. All right, so it's at your level being what you can understand right now, plus just a little bit. Just a little bit is your current level plus 1. This means that you understand most of what you're reading, but there's a little gap there, a little kind of sliver, if you like the icing on top of the cake, which is unknown vocabulary and grammar, and that small amount of unknown Spanish is perfect and ripe for learning from, because the weight of the context of all the other words and phrases that you already know means that you can take a very good stab at guessing what these new words mean. And as Krashen says, you don't learn by conscious learning and rote memorization. You learn when you understand what you listen to or what you read. This is the key. You learn when you understand what you read or listen to. And so by reading a lot and having just a small amount of stuff that is new for you, you can very easily just guess and get used to what you're reading in a natural way. That is the key to growing a large vocabulary in Spanish and learning thousands and thousands of words. It is not through the traditional methods of learning. The trouble is, of course, you can't necessarily measure your progress from minute to minute, and this is why it's kind of difficult to get a foothold with this kind of method. You can't say, okay, I've learned 10 new words today. You have to kind of get to the end of the week and trust that these words start to become more concrete in your mind, and they do, but not if you're kind of sitting there waiting for it to happen. Okay? This is why with the Fluent Spanish Academy, what we do is we just focus on giving so much material so that you can actually read at your level into short stories, interesting stories pitched perfectly at the intermediate level, or listening comprehension training we have, so you can kind of listen to natural conversations in different dialects of Spanish with the full transcript there. But these are all the ways that you can listen at your level and read at your level, and that's how your vocabulary will just grow exponentially over time. All right. So hope that's given you food for thought. If you find yourself working through structured textbooks and structured exercises a lot, then just take heed of that, and remember that while it may feel like you're learning, if you really want to build the vocabulary that you need in Spanish, you've got to get exposure to more stuff. If you don't, you'll simply, however well you learn these words that you're trying to learn, it will never be enough. Alright? So that's my message for today. Y bueno, voy a intentar seguir haciendo estos vídeos en cuanto pueda, y nos vemos en la próxima. Vale, adiós.